The first time I ever stepped onto a plane. My heart beat louder than the airport announcements. Everything around me felt oversized, the glass walls, the moving walkways, the departure boards flickering with cities I had only seen in movies. I wasn't alone, though. My friend Hamza walked beside me, pretending to be calm. But I could tell from the way he kept adjusting his backpack straps that he was just as nervous as I was. This trip wasn't just my first flight. It was my first real journey away from home, away from the streets that knew my footsteps and the walls that had heard all my secrets. 8 hours in the air sounded like a lifetime to someone who had never even sat in a plane seat before. Hamza grinned and said, "Just think of it like a really long bus ride with wings." I laughed, but my palms were already sweating. As we handed over our passports and boarding passes, something inside me shifted. It felt like crossing an invisible line, the one between the life I had known on the one waiting ahead. The airport smelled of coffee, metal, and something sharp and new. Voices in different accents floated past us, reminding me that the world was much bigger than my neighborhood. When we reached the boarding gate, I stared through the huge window at the airplane. It looked unreal, like a giant silver bird resting quietly before flight. I wondered how something so heavy could ever leave the ground. I wondered the same about myself. "Imagine," Hamza said softly, "in a few hours we'll be somewhere completely different." That thought scared me and thrilled me. Part 2, Takeoff. Inside the plane, everything felt tight and narrow. The aisle was barely wide enough, and the seats looked smaller than I had imagined. I pressed my forehead against the window, watching as people settled in, stowing bags, fastening seatbelts. A flight attendant smiled and welcomed us, her voice calm and practiced, like someone who trusted the sky more than the ground. When the engine started, my chest tightened. The sound grew louder, vibrating through my bones. I looked at Hamza, who raised his eyebrows and whispered, "Too late to back out now." The plane began to move, slowly at first, then faster. The runway blurred beneath us. My hands gripped the armrests as the nose lifted, and suddenly the ground dropped away. For a moment my stomach felt like it stayed behind on the runway. Then silence, soft and floating. I looked out the window and gasped. The city shrank into patterns of lights and lines. Roads like thin veins, buildings like tiny blocks. Clouds appeared below us, thick and white, like an endless ocean of cotton. "We're flying," I whispered. Hamza nodded, eyes wide. "Yeah, we really are." In that moment, fear gave way to wonder. I realized how small my worries were compared to the vast sky stretching endlessly in every direction. Part 3, Hours in the Air. 8 hours is a strange amount of time. Too long to feel quick, too short to feel endless. We talked about everything, our childhood memories, our dreams, the things we had never said out loud. Somewhere over the clouds, honesty felt easier. Maybe it was because the ground was far away, and no one could overhear us except the hum of the engines. At one point, the cabin lights dimmed and most passengers fell asleep. I stayed awake, watching the wings slice through the night sky. Stars shimmered like distant promises. I wondered how many people were awake below us, living their lives without knowing we were passing silently overhead. I thought about my family, about home. I thought about who I was before this flight and who I might be after it. Travel, I realized, doesn't begin when you land. It begins the moment you decide to leave. Part 4, Turbulence. Midway through the journey, the plane began to shake. The seatbelt sign lit up, and the calm voice of the captain announced turbulence ahead. My heart raced. The shaking grew stronger, and for the first time, fear returned. I imagined worst-case scenarios, my thoughts spiraling faster than the plane itself. Hamza noticed and placed his hand on my arm. "It's okay," he said. "Planes are built for this." I nodded, trying to believe him. The turbulence passed as suddenly as it had begun. The plane steadied, and I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. That brief moment taught me something important. Fear doesn't mean danger, it means uncertainty. And uncertainty is part of every journey worth taking. Part 5, Arrival Approaches. As the final hours passed, excitement replaced exhaustion. The flight attendants announced our descent, and the window revealed a new land below different colors, different shapes, unfamiliar and inviting. My first flight was almost over, but I knew something inside me had just begun. I looked at Hamza and smiled. I think this trip changed me. He laughed. We haven't even landed yet. But I knew. 8 hours in the sky had given me something priceless. Courage. The wheels hit the runway with a firm thud, and the entire cabin erupted into quiet relief seat belts clicking open. People stretching, tired smiles exchanged between strangers. I felt something warm spread through my chest. We had made it. My first flight was no longer a fear. It was now a memory. As the plane slowed, I looked out the window again. The land beneath us was unfamiliar, different roads, different buildings, a different rhythm to everything. Even the air looked different, as if it carried stories I hadn't heard yet. Hamza leaned back and sighed. 8 hours in the sky, he said. And now, a new chapter. I nodded. My legs felt shaky when we stood up. Not just from sitting too long, but from the weight of the moment. Walking down the aisle, toward the exit felt like walking into another version of myself, someone braver, someone wider than before. When the plane door opened, a wave of new air rushed in. It smelled strange, sharp, and exciting. I took my first step onto.
We followed signs, collected our bags, and stood still for a moment after clearing immigration, unsure which direction to go. That pause standing in a place where no one knew us felt powerful. No expectations, no history, just possibility. Outside, the city welcomed us with noise. Car horns, distant voices, engines roaring like restless animals. Tall buildings stretched upward, as if trying to touch the same sky we had just crossed. This, I said quietly, is what freedom feels like. Part 4. First night, new thoughts. That night, in a small hotel room, sleep refused to come. My body was exhausted, but my mind was wide awake. I lay staring at the ceiling, replaying the flight in my head, the takeoff, the clouds, the fear, the calm. Hamza was already asleep, breathing steadily, unaware that I was having one of the most important conversations of my life with myself. I realized that my fear of flying had never really been about planes. It had been about leaving comfort, about trusting something unseen to carry me forward. The plane hadn't just flown through the sky. It had carried me past my limits. I promised myself something that night. I will not let fear decide the size of my world. Part 5. Days that changed me. The days that followed were filled with discovery. Streets I had never walked. Faces I would never forget. Food that tasted like stories passed down through generations. Every experience felt sharper, brighter, more alive. I noticed changes in myself. I spoke more confidently. I listened more deeply. I felt less afraid of being lost, because I had learned that being lost sometimes leads you exactly where you need to be. One evening, as Hamza and I sat watching the sunset paint the city in gold, he said, "Do you ever think about how different we'll be when we go back?" I smiled. We won't go back the same, and that was the truth. Part 6. The return flight. When it was time to return home, the airport no longer frightened me. The plane no longer felt like a monster of metal and noise. It felt familiar, almost friendly. As we took off again, I didn't grip the armrests. I watched calmly as the ground fell away. Fear had been replaced by respect, and uncertainty by trust. 8 hours later, when we landed back home, everything looked the same. But I wasn't. Part 7. What the sky taught me. That first flight taught me lessons no classroom ever could. That fear shrinks when faced. That friendship grows stronger in unfamiliar places. That the world is vast, but so is the human heart. And that sometimes, all it takes is one journey to realize how high you can rise. Even now, whenever I hear the distant roar of a plane, my heart doesn't race with fear. It rises with memory. Because once, I flew for the first time, and the sky changed me forever. Part 3. The airport of strangers. The airport was enormous, louder and more alive than any place I had ever seen. Announcements echoed in languages I didn't understand. Yeah, I replied honestly. But in a good way. foreign ground, and felt something inside me whisper, "You're not the same person who boarded that plane." For the first time, I felt small but not weak. Hamza laughed when he saw my face. Overwhelming, right?